Pete is a retired colonel with the United States Marine Corps Reserve. He has commanded an infantry, a platoon, company, and battalion, in addition to being the senior U.S. advisor to an Iraqi Army brigade. He was the Minister of Defense Coordinator for the 2nd Marine Expedition Force, responsible for coordinating the rebuilding of the new Iraqi army in Western Iraq. He served as the Deputy Project Manager for security of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan, and the Deputy G3 Marine Forces Europe, and the Executive Officer 25th Marine Regiment, the 4th Marine Division. Today, his greatest challenge and rewards come from playing with his 3-year-old granddaughter, who keeps him on his toes and reminds him what life is all about. I would like to welcome Colonel Martino and thank you for being here to share your thoughts with us today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's an honor to be here today with all of you on this very solemn and sacred day. I'd like to thank Commandant McKay and your entire staff for your service and all the great work you do here for these veterans. I'd like to also thank Valerie Cummings for inviting me to speak here today, and also for the incredible tour she gave me of this facility last month, where I had the pleasure of meeting people like Justin in the rec department, Heather at the store, and so many others. I can't tell you all how much I really appreciate all the work you folks do here taking care of these veterans. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Richard Kimball. Hoorah! My brother, my brother, my Navy brother, Tom Sawyer, who's also a Gold Star son. His father served in World War II. He's one of the ones we'll be honoring today. He didn't make it home. Tom. I'd also like to thank all the veterans that are here today for your sacrifice. Some of you sacrificed a lot. Limbs, organs, your health, time from family, friends. When you were serving this country, you missed a lot of special moments. Weddings, anniversaries, funerals, birthdays, births, baby's first steps, graduations, holidays. We're not here to lament over any of our sacrifices. Today's all about remembering and honoring those who made the ultimate sacrifice while serving this country and didn't come home. The real challenge today is, how do we remember and honor them in a meaningful way that's worthy of their sacrifice? Well, I'm going to attempt to do that, and I realize this is a tough holiday for a lot of us, and like I told my kids, you're tougher. So if need be, feel free to lean on each other, as we all have at one point or another in the past. Dr. David Eagleman said that we have 3 deaths. The first is when our body ceases to function. The second is when our body is consigned to the grave. And the third is that point sometime in the future when your name is spoken for the last time. Dr. Irvin Yalom expounded on that concept when he wrote, "Someday soon, perhaps in 40 years, there'll be no one alive who's ever known me. That's when I will be truly dead, when I exist in no one's memory." I thought a lot about how someone very old is the last living individual to have known some person or cluster of people. When that person dies, the whole cluster dies too, vanishes from the living memory. I wonder who that person will be for me, whose death will make me truly dead. With that in mind, I'd like to take about a minute or two and give each one of you an opportunity to just close your eyes if you'd like, but recall a fond memory of one or more of those that we're here honoring today that was special to you. And feel free to say their name out loud, as well as any qualities or attributes about them that you valued the most, or even missed the most.
Corporal Michael Olette, United States Marine Corps. Killed in action, Afghanistan, 2009. Tough as nails. One of the nicest people you'd ever meet in your life.
First Lieutenant Brian McPhillips was killed in Iraq, April 2003. 23 years old, one of the greatest guys I ever met.
Avila R. Sawyer, my dad, killed March 18, 1945. He was a great dad. He stayed myself, my two brothers out from Ryan's. Thanks, Dad.
Master Sergeant TIE, United States Marine Corps, killed in action in Afghanistan. Relentless. He's a relentless human being.
I'd like to bring us all back to the present moment and offer my deepest condolences to all of you for your own personal losses. One of the ways that I try to honor the fallen these days is I try to incorporate their qualities, the qualities about them that I admired the most, into myself. That way they continue to live through us, not just in our memories, but in our actions also. At the basic school for Marine officers in Quantico, Virginia, there's a wall that has pictures and citations for every Marine lieutenant who was awarded the Medal of Honor. And I know that lieutenants and ensigns, for my Navy brothers and sisters, are the subject of a lot of scorn and contempt. And rightly so in many cases. I did plenty of boneheaded things when I was a young second lieutenant, not only then, but every rank I ever held. But where else in the civilian world would somebody in their early 20s be given so much responsibility and be put in charge of so many people? And the same is true of our young NCOs, who literally are the backbone of our entire military. When I was a platoon commander during a battalion exercise, one of my Marines went hypothermic on the side of Mount Fuji, Japan, during a snowstorm. While we were waiting for the medevac, I whipped up some hot chocolate and had him sit up in his sleeping bag, and I said, "Drink this." And as I was pouring it in his mouth, he was just gulping it down. I couldn't believe it. So finally I stopped and I said, "Is this hot enough?" And he simply said, "Yes, sir, it's scalding my throat." It's not quite the gold standard that was set by those lieutenants on the wall back at Quantico. Sorry, Lance Corporal Graham. I'd hoped to be more like one of my heroes, Second Lieutenant John Bobo, from that wall. He was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Company I was establishing night ambush sites when the command group was attacked by a reinforced North Vietnamese company supported by heavy automatic weapons and mortar fire. Second Lieutenant Bobo immediately organized a hasty defense and moved from position to position, encouraging the outnumbered Marines despite the murderous enemy fire. Recovering a rocket launcher from among the friendly casualties, he organized a new launcher team and directed its fire into the enemy machine gun positions. When an exploding enemy mortar round severed Second Lieutenant Bobo's right leg below the knee, he refused to be evacuated and insisted upon being placed in a firing position to cover the movement of the command group to a better location. with a web belt around his leg serving as a tourniquet and his leg jammed into the dirt to contain the bleeding, he remained in his position and delivered devastating fire into the ranks of the enemy, attempting to overrun the Marines. Second Lieutenant Bobo was mortally wounded while firing his weapon into the main point of the enemy attack, but his valiant spirit inspired his men to heroic efforts, and his tenacious stand enabled the command group to gain a protective position where it repulsed the enemy onslaught. Second Lieutenant Bobo's superb leadership, dauntless courage, and bold initiative reflected great credit upon himself and upheld the highest traditions of the Marine Corps and the U.S. Naval Service. He gallantly gave his life for his country. Where do we get people like Lieutenant Bobo? Or Lieutenant Lance Corporal Graham, for that matter, who would have stormed the gates of hell if I simply pointed at it? They come from all walks of life, every background, every corner of our country. They're just ordinary people who were put in extraordinary situations and rose to the challenge, and their true character came out. Situations like the Battle of Iwo Jima, where uncommon valor became a common virtue. I'm under no illusions. I'm sure that Lieutenant Bobo, just like all of us, had his flaws and imperfections. Several years ago, I had the honor of presenting a flag to a Marine's widow. He, like me, had plenty of imperfections. I also presented a Marine Corps Challenge coin to his young grandson and told him if, God forbid, he ever went to war, he'd want to be surrounded by people like his papa. He was fearless. I think the reason that he was so fearless is because he was so tough and hard. He was hard as woodpecker lips. But he had a soft side too. He'd give you the shirt off his back. He literally epitomized General Mattis's unofficial motto of the Marines in Iraq, which was, no better friend, no worse enemy. He was brutally honest also. He was free with his opinions, but he did everything in a non-judgmental way. He allowed other people to have their opinions too. But he was hard on people, real hard. And I think that the main reason for that was he wanted people to be better. He wanted them to be tougher. He wanted them to live their best lives. But it didn't always come across that way, especially when it was coupled with some of his imperfections, which I'll leave with him in the grave. On his deathbed, I went to visit him. He lived fast and life to the fullest. He had a great sense of humor. He was always quick with a joke. When I saw him in his deathbed, he couldn't speak, so I wanted to tell him a joke, but I couldn't think of one. So I told him, I'll have to get back to you. Well, I never got the chance. So I told him at his wake. And I'm going to tell it here too. But first, I want to share a couple of other thoughts on how we can honor those that aren't with us anymore. Sometime in the next few days even, I'd like all of us, I'd like to challenge us all to do some self-reflection and ask ourselves, how do we want to be remembered? What are the qualities and traits and virtues that we want said about us? What don't we want said about us? And so what I propose is, as you're doing your own self-reflection, think of all the negative traits and qualities in yourself. Let's put those to death and bury them with the fallen so that we can live our best lives and make those who aren't here proud of us and glad that we survived and that we're here, living life to the fullest for them. Another thing I'd challenge us all on is, let's bring this nation together and start looking for common ground instead of differences. We seem to always point out differences, whether it's race, religion, politics, controversial issues. Let's start getting in the habit of finding the common ground with each other and then try to expand that ground. The ground that we all have in common with those we're honoring today is this document right here. It's the U.S. Constitution. I think one of the best ways we can honor them is to read it, know it, live it, and if necessary, educate others about it. After all, it's what they died for. We should cherish it. It defines and established our form of government, which is a republic, by the way. We all just pledged our allegiance to it with the flag a few moments ago. Now, the people who wrote it, they were no more or less perfect than us, and neither were the times they were living in. But that shouldn't detract one bit from the beauty and the simplicity of this historic masterpiece. And so I brought extra copies and I've left them with Heather at the store. So I encourage you all to take a copy and start sharing it with folks. That's, I think, another way we can honor those we're here today to honor. And now, the joke I promised. One year there was a bird that decided not to fly home or fly south for the winter. Everything was great until about the first big snowstorm. But by then it was too late. As he tried to fly south, his wings iced over and froze, and he fell to the earth into the snow. And as he lay there shivering and freezing to death, he thought, oh my God, how could this get any worse? A question nobody in the military has ever asked. Because you don't know. They can. At that moment, a cow came by and took a big crap right on him. And he just was devastated. He gave up at that point and was just accepting death. And then suddenly, he felt some feeling in his wing. And then he realized that the crap was warm. And it was actually thawing him out. And he realized he wasn't going to freeze to death. And so he was so excited and filled with joy, he began to sing. And as he sang, there was a cat coming around the corner of the barn, and he heard the singing, so he went over, and he picked the bird out of the crap, he washed him up, cleaned him up, and he ate him. And the moral of the story is, not everybody who craps on you is necessarily your enemy. And not everybody who gets you out of the crap is necessarily your friend. And most importantly, when you're covered in crap, keep your mouth shut. Thank you all for being here today to honor our heroes and heal ourselves, our families, and our nation. Thank you.